Hey guys, I hope you're having a good week. I am sorry to get such a late start on getting this video out to you guys. This week has kind of gone a little bit crazy. So we are talking about the Desert Challenge book. So this week in class, if you remember, we talked about In the Wild, You're Stronger Together. And this is Can Bear Teach Sophie How to Survive? So if you remember, at the end of week 1, Ollie from the Blizzard Challenge had passed on the compass to Sophie. Sophie was the one who really didn't like bugs. Remember, she was at the camp and she saw this spider on a woodpile and just screamed and really was just not liking bugs and wasn't liking camp because of all the bugs. So this talks about Sophie. This is the Desert Challenge. So here we go. Here's chapters 1 and 2. So this shows Sophie. It says nasty insects. Sophie was on a roll. As she pelted down the field with the rest of her 5-a-side team, she thought that this had to be the best camp ever. Sophie was on the red team. The yellows had a good defense going. Every time the reds got the ball halfway to the other end of the field, the yellows always managed to get hold of it and kick it back. Then the reds would take it and run back toward the yellows again. That was how it had been for most of the game. They were in the last few minutes and the score was 0-0. Sophie suddenly saw her chance. She was about 12 feet from the goal. Chloe had the ball over on the other side of the field, and Olivia, the defender on the yellow team, was charging at her. Chloe gave the ball a desperate kick and hoped for the best. The ball curved up into the air towards Sophie. Sophie timed her leap perfectly. She could have headed it, but headers weren't allowed in 5-a-side, so she jumped up just as the ball was starting to come down. It bumped her in the chest and fell at her feet. Sophie kicked the ball clean into the net. Goal! The ref blew her whistle and the Reds had won 1-0. The fans cheered. The yellows congratulated them. Next time, Olivia promised with a big smile. Sophie and Chloe wandered over to the touchline together to get their things. Fatima, who shared their tent, had been watching and came over. Drink? Chloe offered Sophie a bottle of juice. Just as Sophie took it, she saw movement in the corner of her eye. The wasp came straight at her out of nowhere. Sophie couldn't help it. She screamed and jerked her entire body away from the insect. Juice squirted all over Fatima. The wasp flew off. Ack! Fatima said. Fatima stared down at the soaked front. I'm sorry, Sophie blurted. So here they are. They just finished up. She sees this bug way up here, and it scares her enough to squeeze her juice. She gets it all over Fatima. It's not your fault, Fatima tried to put a good face on. Anyone can be afraid of wasps. She looked down at herself again. But it was my last clean shirt. You can have one of mine from the tent, Sophie promised. You don't have to, Fatima said. Yes, Sophie insisted. Yes, I do. She started back to their tent and was soon away from all the other kids. She could still hear them through the trees. Everyone was laughing and chatting and shouting all the usual things. But she was all on her own by the time she reached her tent. She didn't like being alone in there. Sophie almost chickened out until she remembered she had made Fatima a promise. She would get that shirt. Her heart pounded and her mouth was dry. She leaned forward, took a breath, and pulled the zipper open. Inside, all the girls' gear was in jumbled piles. It was how they had left it that morning. Sophie's stuff was furthest from the flap, so she had to climb over her friend's things. She rummaged inside the bag. I know you'll get them all wet and dirty, Mom had said, so make sure you take a few. Sophie scrambled through the pile until she had a shirt for Fatima. She turned to go at the exact moment that her worst fears came true. A crane fly came bumbling in through the flap. So here's her looking into the tent. She really wasn't sure about going in. So then comes a crane fly. Do you know what a crane fly is? What they look like? Here is Sophie getting the shirt, and that is the crane fly. It's Chapter 2, Daddy Longlegs. Sophie shrieked and threw herself back to get away from the insect. The whole tent shook. She tried to hide in a corner, making herself as small as possible. The crane fly swung from side to side in the air like it was trying to block her escape. "Go away," she begged it, but the insect stayed put, fussing around like it couldn't decide whether to go up or down or whatever. Then suddenly it was gone. She had only taken her eyes off of it for a moment, and now it had vanished, but she was almost certain that it hadn't gone out. That meant it was still in the tent. It was somewhere between her and the flap. It was perched on someone's sleeping bag or on top of a discarded hoodie or a pair of shoes. "Okay," Sophie said with clenched teeth. "It's just a daddy long legs. I'm not going to be beaten by a spider with wings." So is a crane fly really a daddy long legs? Daddy long legs is a spider, and a crane fly is a fly. So they might look similar as far as being long legs, but they're two different insects. But Sophie hated them all the same, right? All she wanted was for it to stay in one place so she could get out and get on with her day. Sophie held her breath and started to crawl for the flap. She moved an arm. Nothing happened. She moved a leg, then another arm. She shifted forward a bit. Still no daddy long legs. Maybe it had gone to sleep? She moved her other arm, and the crane fly took off right in front of her. Sophie flung herself back without thinking, and with a scream, the tent shook again. This was ridiculous. She had to be 1,000,000 times bigger than the nasty insect. Why was she so afraid? There was nothing for it. She didn't want to hurt it, but she didn't have a choice if she was going to get out of that tent that afternoon. She picked up a heap of clothes and flung them over where she had last spotted the crane fly. Then she crawled forward as quickly as she could, plowing her way through the other girls' things to get to the entrance. But the flap had closed. The Velcro tabs had gotten stuck together. Sophie almost sobbed as she scrabbled to get it open. She was sure it was behind her, ready to crawl down her neck. She tugged at the flap so hard it almost tore her, but then it was open. Sophie shot out of the tent like soda out of a bottle. She only just remembered to grab the clean shirt for Fatima on the way. It would have been too bad to forget it and have to start all over again. Once she was safely outside, she wanted to kick something. She was so angry with herself. Why did she always do this with bugs? Why? Sophie drew several deep breaths to calm herself down, but deep down inside, she wanted to burst into tears. She hated this. She hated feeling so helpless. She knew a daddy longlegs was harmless, but horrible spiders and insects just made her feel sick, and there was nothing she could do about it. She hated them all. Spiders, wasps, bees, beetles, caterpillars, earwigs. I mean, what is the point? She shouted. She wasn't shouting at anyone in particular, just bugs in general. Bees. Okay, bees make honey, but you could probably grow honey in a lab or something. What about all the others? What is the point of nasty insects that buzz around in the way? That was when she realized a boy was there looking at her. She turned bright red. Normally, when someone saw her being frightened of an insect, she tried to make a joke of it. She would say something like, "Wow, that gave me a shock. I thought it was something else," and give a little laugh. It was too late for that now. He would have heard everything. He must have wondered what all the fuss was about. "What do you want?" she snapped. He looked at her like she was weird in some way, and he was too polite to point it out. Now she remembered seeing him before. They had been gathering logs to build dens at the woodpile, and she had screamed when she saw a spider. He had heard her then as well. Sophie felt her toes curling with embarrassment. "I just want to give you this," he said gently. "It's a gift." He held out his hand with something in it. "What is it?" Sophie asked. "Your adventure," he replied. So there's Ollie passing on the compass. Sophie was still annoyed, but she was curious, so she took what he was offering. It was a small plastic pocket compass. Nothing special. Thanks, I guess. He added, "it helped me. It really did." He gave her a hopeful smile and then hurried off. Sophie stared after him. Then she shrugged and stuck the compass in her pocket. She had the new shirt for Fatima, which was the main thing, but she was still furious with herself and those horrible insects. All right. So we read chapters 3 and 4 in class. So So we'll have to follow up and find out about Sophie and Bear and how things are going with chapter 5 next. Okay, so stay tuned for the next chapters. Bye, guys.